one of the things that's particularly interesting about PRASA is I want to frame this conversation into the past, the present, and then I want to go into the future. The past is particularly difficult, and the past is interestingly aligned in terms of some of the challenges that we've seen from a country perspective, where SOCs have also been significantly affected and impaired as a result of various factors and dynamics that we're all familiar with. And there has obviously been a particular spotlight on 2 or 3 specific SOCs, the ESCOMs, the Transnets, etc. But without a doubt, there was a significant impact in terms of a variety of perfect storm moments, including COVID and the impact of COVID, including vandalism and the impact on vandalism, including what I teach here at the business school about norms that we've created in terms of the fact that public transport or public assets belong to us as citizens, as society. So, in the last 5 years, if you look back before the turnaround, paint a picture for me about some of the challenges that you've seen at PRASA and the team seen at PRASA.
Yeah. So I think 5 years is a good period to look back. I wouldn't want to go much further.
Sure.
But leading into that period, 2019, 2020, many SOEs have gone through a specific traumatic period. We all know the discussions around state capture and so forth. And I think what many don't realize, because you ask about the environment you're working in, is that, and PRASA is 15,000 strong in terms of staff members.
Wow.
We're quite a big organization. But what people don't sometimes realize is the impact that has on the psyche of the workforce. And if you put yourself in that situation where you have got up and down your corridors, you've got investigations, you've got the SIU, you've got the Hawks, you've got forensic investigations, what that does to the staff psyche.
Sure.
So over and above the infrastructure theft, vandalism that you have seen, and I'll touch on that, a key aspect was also the trauma that the staff had gone through.
Yes.
And you can't paint everybody with the same brush. That's a very important factor. But what you tend to see happening is that there's a focus on the wrongdoing, which one needs to focus on. I mean, it's very important you correct those things, but it's probably not even 1%.
Sure.
Of, if I can call it, the employee base. So one of the key things is, how do you reawaken that workforce?
Yes.
Making sure that you've got a workforce that is feeling empowered, that is committed, and feel trusted within this environment. So that's one of the key things that sometimes gets overlooked. But where we come from this past 5 years, as you've mentioned, there's been a lot of instability. You have found within the last just 10 years, as an example, you've had more than 10 acting group CEOs at PRASA.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
So there's no stability at the leadership level. You find even at the board level, the turnover of the board. So that stability, that momentum was not there to implement any strategies and so forth.
Sure.
Everything changes after 6 months or a year. You find something new happening. That's part of it. Then you talk about, obviously, your systems, your control processes, which led to some of these things.
Right.
Now, on top of all of that, we then find what's happened in the last 5 years. You've seen the theft and destruction within our environment. Prior to COVID, if I can put it that way, we were operating 40 corridors nationally.
Right.
Coming out of that period, we were operating on 4
Wow.
of the 40. And even those 4, we could not operate our normal service. We had to find a locomotive to run a diesel on one of the lines because the electric infrastructure has been stolen. And then over and above that destruction that you see to the infrastructure, it includes our buildings, our stations, that you have seen this. And the extent of that, for many that may have seen the photographs, it looked like you were in a war zone.
Yes. Yes.
This was organized crime. The infrastructure was basically stripped. And once you've taken out all the copper, the cables, you then move to the bricks, the windows, the fittings, and everything. So it had to be a total rebuild to some extent.
Yes.
Of the network that we've had prior to 2020.
So you talk about trauma, right? Yesterday I had a conversation with Mteto Nyati, and I said to him, Mteto, when you got the call, why did you take the job, man? Like, the country's not happy with ESCOM. The lights out all the time. Everyone's pissed off. We're being told it's an absolute it's impossible to turn it around. And he's done brilliant work like what you guys have done at PRASA. Obviously, as a human being, you go through your own personal conversation in terms of how am I going to do this? Talk a little bit around the personal dilemmas you faced.
Okay, that's a very interesting question, and I don't know if I should say it, but I did not look for this job.
Right.
I did not want it, and I'm being honest about that.
Sure.
I mean, at the time, the environment and we know the pressures that comes with this job. It's not something you go out looking for, but at some point there's a realization that you've also got a duty.
Right.
And the fact that I've mentioned I've been there for 20 years, I understand the business. I've been in the public transport, but also specifically in the rail environment. And I thought, let me put my name into the hat.
Right.
And that's what happened. But part of that thought process, part of, I can call it that bit of reluctance, is that when you look at a job, and I mean, an SOE, running an SOE is not an easy job.
100%.
I mean, if it was just the normal day-to-day running, yes, but there are many factors one needs to deal with. And I think one of the key things I did very early on is that because you can walk into a job feeling overwhelmed from day one.
Yeah.
There could be hundreds of issues that you think you must address. And for me, that was not the approach I was going to take.
Yes.
There were 3 or 4 things I said, for the period that I'm around, I want to focus on this. This is where the energy should go in. And part of that is to make sure, and you mentioned it up front, and I want to stress that it's not about an individual.
Right.
It's about a team.
Yes.
To make sure that you've got the right team around you to assist you getting through that. And some of my colleagues are here in the room that I also owe a great deal to. So when I've moved in, there were 3 things, and I've touched on the first one, is I need to reawaken this workforce at PRASA.
Right.
That was one of the first things that you needed to give attention. Second one was obviously get the trains running. We can't be running trains on 4 out of the 40 corridors.
Yes.
We needed to get the trains up and running, make sure that the services are resuming.
How many corridors are running now? Sorry?
31.
Wow. Okay.
We've got 31,
Brilliant.
and we'll touch on that. Yeah. And then the third one was obviously around making sure we've got the right controls, governance in place, that we don't see a repeat of some of these things happening. And when you unpack some of these things, there's this sub sort of goals that you will get to.
Sure.
But one needs to make sure you tackle that up front. Make sure you don't lose focus in terms of achieving these things. And we put the right mechanisms in place at PRASA to make sure we can challenge each one of these things. Just to give you a heads up to the team as well, is that when we stepped in, and this goes back to the governance and controls and the environment, we had a 4-year cycle of receiving a disclaimer from the Auditor General.
Wow.
And within that first year, the team, we managed to get out of the disclaimer cycle.
Right.
And that it required a lot of input, a lot of work by the team, very clear audit plan that we need to put in place. We're not where we want to be.
Sure.
Because the journey and the discussion we're going to have here is not saying PRASA has recovered fully or where we want to be. But it's a journey we're on. We're moving in the right direction. And there's been significant steps, achievements that we have done in this past 24 months.